Hey guys, so today we'll be covering how G2 absolutely bodied top esports in some of the most creative and, I guess, resourceful use of drafting that I've seen almost throughout the entirety of the MSI tournament. And I think top was just simply not prepared for the way that G2 approaches the game from pretty much every aspect. And they had pretty much give the strongest case that a Western team can really command their way to the top and really just take really nice, confident wins from these Western teams. I mean, from these Eastern teams, rather. And this was a combination of both the priorities that G2 has on draft that differs from what top esports has, their unique answers to certain picks that a lot of the meta is doing right now, as well as identifying really key pivot points for them to realize that there are certain strategies available. And I think this is truly a big reason as to why their win was so commanding over a strong team like top. And I want to get in and start it with each of the games and kind of see how it evolves. So to start things off, you can tell that top is already kind of sandbagging a bit because they have to use pretty much at least one ban every single game against top lane pool. Ironically, top esports banning against all the top laners. Zach Poppy in this game one, for an example, right? This is a recurring trend. It was pretty clear that top was just playing pretty much weak side for 369 stylistically, and they had to make some pivots, and they weren't used to it, and they really got punished for it in the end a lot of the time. In the remaining parts of this first game, you can kind of see the differences and some of the answers that G2 have, right? Leona is something that hasn't been extremely popular within MSI so far, but they found a very confident answer in playing around this Kalista Tristana sort of draft. And you can see that G2 have been practicing something like this because of both their ability to kind of pick their remaining champions around these two AD carries to support them really well. One being Leona, and then picking Leona on 3, and then banning out the options that would negate this Leona. So you can see the Braum Renata bans, really smart moves here, because it allows the Tristana Leona to basically do what they want to do. The Ivern on 4 reinforces this, because it not only is a decent counter into the Xin Zhao, but it also helps facilitate and really lets the 280 carries run loose, right? And pretty much top are just spoon feeding them free answers on every single pick. It's not normal to be able to get strong counter pick from pretty much from R1 to R5. This is a classic example, right? Sure, you can. The Varus is a soft counter to the Kalista in this case, and this is probably the main area where top esports garnered, let's say, advantage, quote unquote, against G2. But every other pick, they blind the Tristana. It's still it's just going to be a lane dominator. Leona does fairly well into the rest of their comp, and they got really strong picks on both 4-5. They have winning lanes pretty much everywhere, and usually in a pro play setting, if it doesn't really matter what your comp is, to be honest with you, if you win all 3 lanes, because you can compensate for usually any composition if you have that much winning potential. And in this case, you even have decent scaling, and that's the crazy part. And this is the first example of where top realized this is probably a bad draft, and G2 prepared answers that they weren't necessarily ready for. And they shifted their strategy a little bit. So Zach Poppy's still banned game 2. Top esports choose blue again. They ban out the Kalista this time as an answer, and they go for a different direction. Draven B1. This hedges against most of the remaining picks, right? At least traditionally, because this goes against Lucian. I believe what else is there? If we check, I believe it's Lucian. Some people are playing Jinx, but not really. And most of the other picks that would be available are not too strong in this case. But one of them, the one that isn't necessarily planned for it, was the Kog'Maw. And Kog'Maw has been extremely strong for a while now, quite a few patches, and remains unpopular. But this doesn't mean that G2 aren't ready to lean into it. Normally, early picking Braum is extremely rare. You almost always want to R5 Braum. But the reason this is so unique is because Braum has a unique counter where his shield is also a wind wall against the Draven axis, and also Kog'Maw pretty much presents a win condition as a single champion, right? He, in his lonesome, can win entire games. Obviously, we know the power of this champion, right? It's very 1v9, highest damage output in the game as an AD carry. You can, if he's left untouched, it doesn't really matter. Top tried to respond with it with 2 picks that are arguably pretty good into it. Corki, which gives great poke, and then Jarvan, which helps lock it down since Kog'Maw has no mobility. This, however, gives more room for G2 to get more counter picks, and they've played around with the chains here, right? They understand, like, okay, if you want to play against the lose con of our Kog'Maw Braum pick, you're going to have to expose your weaknesses elsewhere. And this gives us a free move for the rest of draft, right? G2 ban support again. They pick really defensive on, not defensive, let's say they don't show their any cards because they have a free Rek'Sai pick on 4. Top, again, go for Cassante. And, Broken Blade is allowed to basically reign supreme in terms of gaining advantage on top side. And of course, you can mitigate this by, let's say, doing lane swap, sacking the TF. Cassante probably does better than TF. But do you really want to be doing that with a Draven lane? Right? Does Draven want to be laning against a top laner with 0 CS and doesn't really care if he gets 0 CS against a Kog'Maw Braum? These are the things. These are the chains that top hasn't really been thinking about, in my opinion, and that's what makes this drafting so strong from G2. Game 3, right? You see G2 again, big Tristana priority here. Top does not care at all, and the turns have tabled a little bit because, surprise, surprise, we kind of forgot that Hansama is a Draven expert. So they go for Corki again because they probably just think the matchup is good to Trist. And this is where top esports gets a little bit spicy. So they go Camille on 3. And normally, from this perspective, you think it's a hedge into the Cassante, right? It discourages Cassante. And they ban out Camille and Volley. And I wouldn't say that Camille is like giga OP and like super blindable every situation. She's that strong right now because I don't really think that's the case. She has a decent win rate and she's pretty strong, but probably not in a vacuum at the moment. She's not that strong. And the reason they did this is because they actually do Camille Flex into support. And G2, very interestingly, are down for this. They sign up, they call their bluff. There's no way they go Camille top here. They put Cassante anyway. They're like, I'm down. I'm about it. It doesn't matter. Right? Top are like, all right, you know what? Let's just move it down. And they go the attrition path. Right? I think there's actually more possible solutions. It's kind of ironic because when top ban out Zach Poppy, it's kind of like, oh wait, we banned all the Cassante counters. So when they pick Cassante, that's kind of an awkward moment because they're like, wait, G2 can do that? And it's kind of funny. And because they kind of forgot that not only can G2 play their own style, they can also play the style that everybody else is playing. And suddenly, their comp looks normal, but it looks good. And they're like, wait, hold up. So the entire time, it's not like top were forcing their own advantages or anything like that. They're drafting to not lose. They're drafting to think about what is G2 going to cook? How can we stop this? What potential pivots are they going to go for? And that's what's been forcing all these interesting moves by top to really just cash themselves with their pants down in draft. And I think this has been far and away what makes these drafts so strong from G2. And I wanted to point that out. So hopefully this gives you guys some context here. And I think G2 really well deserved this win.